Hello everyone, hope this is working okay. So welcome to the live. I'm on my phone this week because I've had to send my laptop in, which also had the questions from last week, which is a bit irritating. So I don't think I've got a huge number of questions. In respect to the post, I think I've only got two or three. So if anyone's got any questions, do put them in here, and I'll try and pick them up while I'm doing the live, which has always kind of eluded me so far, but I'll do my best. First question was, I wanted to ask your views on minimum unit pricing. To me, it just seems a ridiculous concept that will cause more hardship to the addict. It seems to me like a move negotiated with the big alcohol so the governments and industry can both benefit while making absolutely no difference in the level of alcohol consumed. I'd love to see some statistics since they brought the bill into Scotland. So I don't. Yeah, I mean, the idea is obviously there's a lot of very, very cheap alcohol out there that you can get very drunk on very quickly. So if you bring minimum pricing in, supposedly it stops people getting so drunk. But of course, people tend to find money for alcohol, whatever. And I think I mentioned this before, but I think a lot of people who can't really afford alcohol will just end up spending more on it. But to be fair, I don't really know the ins and outs of it. I think it's probably a bit more complicated than people appreciate. So I'm not entirely clear. There was another question there as well, about coming out, about when you're not drinking, which is quite an interesting one. I mean, I never did a big coming out thing. I didn't want to really go public with it. So I just used to say to people, I don't drink, I don't really like it anymore. And if I was forced to give a bit of background, I'd just say, when the kids were young, I found I was very tired, and I just didn't really sort of trouble with using your phone, you get notifications on it. So I just used to say, yeah, when the kids were young, I found I was tired all the time, and I always said that alcohol would interfere with my sleep, so I'd always be tired. And so I stopped drinking for a bit, and then I say, and to be honest, I started going out, not drinking, and enjoying it just as much as when I was drinking, so it didn't really seem any point carrying on with it. I think you really need to just do what's right for you in respect of what you tell people. It's entirely fine to tell them as much or as little as you want. I don't know if anyone's got any other questions because I've just exhausted all of mine. I know a couple of people have said that they've got the questions from the other week, on my earlier post. Okay, I'll try and find it. Might be a bit late now. Sorry, it's been a slightly hectic week. So I'll see if I can find it, I suppose. I'm not even sure where that post is now. I don't know if anyone's got anything. Otherwise, I'm going to be logging off in a second. Any questions at all? This is probably not one for the, not one of my finest. Yeah, I'm struggling. I know it's been posted to the previous thing, but I'm struggling to find that one at the moment. I think I might call it a day. I probably should have called it off tonight. Hopefully I'll have my computer back for next week. I'll just check. I don't think there were any questions in the comments section. No. Oh, here we go. Got them all here. If you hadn't written books, do podcasts, social media and events, do you think you would still be sober? Yeah, absolutely I would have been, I think. I kind of wrote the books not knowing if they'd be helpful to people or not. The podcasts and the social media events, I don't necessarily enjoy them that much, to be honest. But I kind of do it because I think it helps people. And I find it gets easier and easier as time passes as well. But I don't do it so much for myself. But no, absolutely I would be, I think. I don't think there's any question of that. For me, not drinking is just about living a better life. So I wouldn't be drinking simply because I wouldn't choose the worst lifestyle, to be honest. So absolutely. I'm having terrible pain through my body and they think it is nerve damage. I've read this can be from excessive drinking. Do you know much about this? If not, another question. I don't actually. I have heard about this, but sorry, I don't know anything about it. I've been alcohol-free 19 days now, and really it is proving to be not as hard as before as anticipated. Is there a stage where this may change? No, I think when you're over that first hump, which is actually the physical withdrawal and those first couple of weekends, things really do get easier. As soon as your brain chemistry gets back to normal and you start sleeping better, you just open up a so much better lifestyle. Your life is just so much better. Where it may change is you can start taking it for granted, because we humans are very, very good at taking things for granted. So what we're very good at doing is just, when you're drinking, you're exhausted, you're anxious, you're feeling guilty all the time. It's a really unpleasant existence. And then when you stop, you feel loads and loads better. But the problem is you start to take that feeling better for granted, and you still look back on drinking as something that gave you a boost. So you kind of think, oh, I may feel good, but if I had a drink, I'd feel better. But of course you wouldn't, because the only good feeling you ever got from alcohol was it anaesthetising the tiredness and anxiety that it caused previously. And without that tiredness and anxiety, what you actually get from alcohol is just a slightly dulled feeling. It's nothing at all. People often say, oh, but alcohol's been around for thousands of years. They were brewing beer. There's evidence of brewing beer like 4000 BC. Like it's some really crucial and integral part of human society. It's not, okay? It's just that we humans are innately lazy. And if there's a simple way of doing things, we will take that. And it served us very well. It made us create machines and cars and taken us into space, because we make machines so we can move heavy stuff much easier, for example. But also, if there's an easy way to take the edge off anxiety, we will take it. If there's an easy way to change how we're feeling, we'll take it. The only reason we've drunk as opposed to any other drug is not because alcohol is an integral part of human society or development. It's just it's easy to make. If you're making something like opium, you've got to grow the poppies, you've then got to extract the opium from the poppy seed. It's quite a convoluted process. Stuff like methamphetamines, you need all the chemicals, you need a lab, and half the time you end up blowing it up anyway. Alcohol, you just need some rotten fruit or vegetables. So there's nothing special about alcohol other than the ease by which we can make it. So it's not that big a thing, and I think it's important just to remember that. So what I would say is it really isn't, so just don't ever take it for granted. And of course there's two things that make us look back on it and think it was much more pleasant than when we actually experienced it, and that's fading effect bias and ambition. So when I'm talking about ambition, I'm talking about, again, it's like an innate driving force by which we try and improve our lives, but that's made up of two separate factors. One is to be very critical of what we have, and the second one is to fantasize about what we don't have and to make it out to be much better than it is. So when we stop drinking, there is that tendency to start looking back on it as being much more pleasurable and enjoyable than it was. You remember the one or two drinks that you actually enjoyed, like at Christmas or on holiday, or believed you enjoyed anyway, and forget 99.9% of them that you either weren't really aware of or weren't particularly enjoying at the time. So be on your guard for that, but other than that, no, just enjoy it. Why is it that you can read Quitlet and people's stories, know of people who have died through alcoholism, know it actually doesn't you no good, feel rough in the morning, and still the logical part of your mind doesn't put an absolute stop to you even thinking about drinking? So that, for me, is quite often because it's easy to know something on an academic level, but not to assimilate it into your own personal experiences. And that's why when you're reading about what alcohol does and what it doesn't do, you don't just sit there and nod and say, yes, yes, that all makes sense, and then go off and crack open a drink and sit there and luxuriate in how good it makes you feel. You're not achieving anything. You need to take that information and really apply it to your experience. So when you do then next have a drink, think about how you're feeling beforehand. Because if you're a regular drinker, you will feel tired and anxious from the previous drinking. And the pleasure of having an alcoholic drink is to redress that chemical imbalance and to slightly anaesthetise the tiredness. And that's the only pleasure you get from it. So you really need to put the work in. There's no point just reading a book and academically understanding it. You need to apply it to your own experiences. The other thing, of course, it's all about changing your mindset. It's changing from alcohol from something you want to something you really couldn't care less about. So what you need to do, I mean, for a lot of people, obviously, particularly people in the group and watching this video, Alcohol Explained is what did the trick. But it doesn't work for everyone. And if you've read the books and it doesn't work for you, then keep looking. There's a lot of other stuff out there. And it may be the very next thing you look at or read or talk about is the thing that changes that perception that you have. So just keep going. I'm coming up to a year being alcohol-free. Did you do anything to celebrate the milestone, as in a treat or something? I don't think I did. No, I seem to remember my year milestone. So I stopped drinking in February, and I remember it being the 15th because it was just after Valentine's Day. And I remember the year anniversary, I had to go on a business trip in January to Cyprus. I had to go and give a talk, and it just turned into this, not for me obviously, but this massive drinking thing, as it often does with business trips. There was 4 of us out there, and we went into this hotel. It was Cyprus, so it was off season, it was fairly empty, and I think we were there for like a week or 4 or 5 days, and went out every night drinking. And I hadn't quite learned not to stay out all night. So instead of just, having a meal, staying for a couple of drinks and then saying, right, I'm off home, I kind of stayed for the whole evening. And it was all right, but it was, if I did it again, and in fact I've got a business trip coming up again, I don't think it'll be quite the same as this last one. I think it's going to be more in and out, meeting, home, bed, and not such a big boozy affair. But no, it wasn't much of a celebration. So no, but I don't see why you shouldn't. I think it's a nice idea, to be honest. But for me, no, I didn't celebrate it from that fairly unsuccessful business trip. Question, why don't you make a documentary on TV about the content of your fabulous book? On Netflix there is one, but I find it not as good a content as what your book explains. I find it hard to translate all the facts in Dutch. Not everyone understands English that well, especially when it's about medical terms. I may be useful to educate young people learning of the dangers about alcohol. So the reason I don't make a documentary is because I don't have £100,000 lying around spare. I think it's about £5,000 or £6,000 per completed minute for a documentary. So if you're looking at half an hour or an hour, it's an awful lot of money. You can try and get someone to finance you, which is not easy because not many people have £100,000 or £200,000 sitting around that they're ready to throw at something like this. And the people that do have got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people all vying to try and make what they believe is a very important or popular documentary. So the fact is, I would love to, but I just can't and wouldn't even know how to start, to be honest. Yeah, I have had people contact, or had someone contact me about it, and it may or may not ever happen. I don't know. But yeah, it'd be lovely if it did. But it's not as simple as just thinking to yourself, oh, I know, I'll make a documentary and it's done. And the main thing is having the money to put into it to actually make it. When you have a really bad day, how do you get through? So For me personally, I generally try and exercise every day, and it's an unusual day that I don't feel better for that, but it's not impossible. Um, Other things I do is I like to read. I like to just completely lose myself in a book. That always works very well for me. Um, but what you're really talking about is what coping mechanisms do you need, or what do you use for the bad days when alcohol isn't available? And the fact of the matter is, there's thousands of them. I've just mentioned two, like exercise and reading. You could meet friends for tea and coffee, obviously, not for alcohol. Put a film on, you know, yoga, meditation. There's millions and millions of things, and you just have to find what's right for you. Sometimes, most of the times, these things work fairly well. Sometimes they don't work particularly well, but they take the edge off things. As I say, it's unusual that I've had a really bad day and then been out to the gym or been for a run or a cycle or something and not felt better. It does happen occasionally, but I've never felt worse for it, which I did every time I ever turned to alcohol. And sometimes, let's be honest, bad things do happen, and there are times you just have to grit your teeth and be miserable. They do pass, no matter how awful you feel. Things do pass, and sometimes you just have to give it a couple of days. And sometimes it is a question of just being miserable for a couple of days. And there's a chapter on the book of this as well, that people who, they did a study, but people who sit through negative emotions become more resilient, which is pretty much as you'd expect, really, if you think about it. Because if you're always experiencing bad things, you just become accustomed to it, you become used to it. Whereas if every time you feel something bad, you immediately anaesthetise it or try and hide from it, you're never actually getting to grips with it. So, there's lots of things I hate, always hated talking in front of people. And so I went and became a lawyer, and do this in my spare time. So I spend an inordinate amount of time speaking in front of people. And because I do it so often, I won't say I enjoy it, but I'm kind of used to it now. I do it so often. It's like when I was in the army and parachuting, the first parachute I did, I was so terrified. It's etched into my imagination, into my memory. When your adrenaline kicks in, everything looks super like 5D. It's astounding. And I still remember banking over Bryce Norton for my first parachute jump. It's etched into my memory. But the more you do it, the more you relax you become with things, as you can expect. So I ended up doing, I think, about 20 parachute jumps. They were always scary, but nothing quite like that first one. And when you did a lot of them, it was always after a break that it was worse. But on that first parachute course, I think I did 10 jumps in the first week or something. And you're still nervous, but because you're doing it all the time, you get used to it. And it's the same with bad feelings and bad days. Sometimes you just have to sit through them and suffer it and know that it's making you a stronger person overall. Rest up if you need to, William. So do I look that tired? Oh dear. To see if there's any questions, do put them in, and I'll. Yeah, I don't think there is. Hello from London. 30 days today. Well done. Brilliant. 30 days is good because I think it's that month mark, isn't it? So you've got all the brain chemistries back to normal, should be sleeping well, and also a good few weekends under your belt as well, which is often a tough one, isn't it? Let's have a look. Good time of year, my birthday. Happy birthday. Do you ever get tired of talking about alcohol? No, not really. Because the thing is, I think when you talk about it, firstly, you find new ways of explaining it. And I think secondly, you do kind of uncover more stuff yourself. It's kind of like so when I wrote the books, I thought I had it all kind of clear in my mind. But when I wrote the first book, I realised there was kind of a big chunk of it missing and some bits that didn't make sense. So I had to kind of go back and rethink things. So for me, it was a learning process about writing it. And I think talking about it so often is a similar thing. You go over it and over it and over it. And there's always someone that says something that you, either they word a question differently or it gets you thinking about things. And sometimes I do like the hard questions. And this is why sometimes I like doing talks outside of the group, because you get like people asking like really simple things that maybe people in the group take for granted, like, I don't know really, but it's enjoyable. Just simple things like that. Don't you think drinking alcohol is enjoyable? Why do so? You get like questions like that, and it makes you really rethink things and just have to go over it again. So, no, I don't get tired of it. I probably will do one day, I guess, but who knows? How can I get a day one? I want to stop. My health is so bad, anxious, but too easy to drink. Then stop and experience. Hold on, let me just. Anxiety. Yeah, so this is the thing. This is why it's important to get these first few days under your belt, because those first few days is when that chemical imbalance is in place. Now, it's kind of an odd dynamic, but when you feel physically strong and mentally strong, you feel quite adventurous. You know, you take on challenges, you go out there, and that's kind of nature's way. All animals are supposed to explore and, you know, get out there in the world and sort of procreate and expand the species. So when you're feeling healthy and resilient, that's what you want to do. But when you're feeling ill, you shouldn't be doing that. So you naturally want to kind of duvet day, you know, you want to kind of roll up. And one of the things you want to do more than anything is put off difficult things. So when you're feeling ill or a bit under the weather, whatever it is, you want to push the difficult stuff back. Now, when you're constantly tired and anxious from alcohol, you never want to do anything difficult. And what's the most difficult thing you've got that you need to do? It's quit drinking. So you have this weird dynamic where it's never the right time. It's so easy to just think, you know what, I will quit, but just not today, I'll do it tomorrow. What you need to appreciate is, and I don't want to get too morbid here, but you've got a finite number of days before you die. We all do. Nobody lives forever. Okay, there is a limited number of days. Thinking of a clock ticking down. Every day that goes by, you've got one less day. Okay, at the moment, you're limping from day to day, getting closer and closer to the end and wasting it. Like, honestly, I know that might sound harsh, but you are wasting your life. Okay, because you're miserable and anxious, and the only way you can get rid of that is to do something you hate. Difficult as it is, you have to grit your teeth and get those first few days under your belt. You need to know for a fact that those first 3 to 5 days, in fact, the first 24 hours is the worst. Okay, that is the absolute worst bit. It starts to get better, although you still feel rubbish after that. But after 3 to 5 days, you start to get back to normal, and then it gets better and better and better. But what you cannot do is keep putting it off, because days turn into weeks, turn into months, turn into years, turn into decades. And before you know it, your entire life has gone, and you've wasted it being anxious and miserable. So you have to take the bull by the horns and get those first few days under your belt. And that's what you're saying. It's too easy to drink. It always will be. It will never get easier to stop, and it will never get harder to drink. You have to make it happen. I'm not a big one for advocating one day at a time, because it's not a particularly good way to live your life. But for those first few days, you have to do whatever you can to get that first, and I'd say 3 to 5 days. Just give yourself those first few days, because as soon as you get over those, it gets easier and easier and easier. That first 24 hours, as I say, is the worst one. So what I often say to people is just say, I'm going to do 5 days, I'm going to do a week. Not that you'll drink after the week or that you'll stop forever, but just concentrate on that week. Just say, I'm going to give myself a week and see how I feel by the end of it. And I absolutely guarantee it's like pushing a really heavy stone. When you start moving it, it gets momentum going, and it just gets easier and easier. So you have to go for it. You have to take the bull by the horns. and do whatever you can. If you are really heavily drinking, obviously you need to speak to a doctor to make sure you're safe to just quit, but that's what you really need to do. So I hope that's useful and not too depressing. We've got another one here. Bad day plan is critical, but don't forget you're celebrating good day plan as well. Yeah, well, that's true, isn't it? Yeah, they can trigger thoughts of drinking even more. Yeah, no, that's absolutely the case. Plan ahead. So if you've got a celebration or something coming up, just visualization's very good. Just see yourself going in, ordering your soft drink, whatever it is, or planning out your alcohol-free options, just so you know what you're doing during it. Yeah, so someone said, I finally realised there wasn't a right time. That had to be my day one. That's exactly it. I think you just have to go for it and stop expecting something to come along. I don't know if there's any other questions other than that. It's been half an hour, I suppose. I always said these things were going to be about half an hour. I never stop talking, so they always go on for like an hour. But I'll just check. Yeah, I think that's everything. Oh, what I'm doing here. I'm glad you don't get tired talking about it. I learn something every week on these lives. I think I do as well, to be honest. And this week I've learned if I haven't got my laptop all set up, I'll probably give it a miss and start again next week. Just listen to the first book. Absolutely brilliant. Highly recommend. Excellent. Thank you. I think that's it. I was a weekend binge drinker and my sleep was rubbish for months and months too. Well, yeah, that's absolutely it. That was a big thing for me. I think that's about it. Sorry, I'm just flicking through these questions. So glad the questions came through. All right, I think that's it. Well, that was a half-hour one for a change. Well, I should be back next week, and hopefully, as I say, I'll have my proper setup, which will make things a bit easier. I can't remember if I got a guest, because that was the other thing I did. I sent my Mac back for repair, and it's got the list of all my guests on there as well. So it was a bit of a nightmare all round. But anyway, I hope everyone enjoyed it for what it's worth. And have a good weekend, everyone, and hopefully see you next week. Bye.